Hello and welcome to the virtual training for this year's ARMS Phase 3. My name is John Miares and I am the group leader over the surveys team for the USDA NASS Great Lakes region. I am very excited to be talking to you here, although I wish we were able to see each other in person. In this presentation, I want to spend some time talking about several things. First, the training plan, the data collection activities, including both the survey timeline as well as the coordination between ARMS and other ongoing surveys this spring. We'll take a look at some of the resources provided to you, both in hard copy form and on the Purdue site. We'll talk about some key messages to communicate with respondents about the survey and some hints about what to remember when recording data on the paper questionnaire. We'll also want to take a look at what to do with your forms once they are complete. I hope you're able to find this information useful and informative, but if you have any questions that are not answered between this presentation and the other materials available on the ARMS3 pages of the Purdue GLR website, which from now on I'm just going to call the Purdue site, then I'll include some contact information at the end of this presentation for the members of the ARMS team who can help you. With that, let's get started. First, let's talk about the training plan. In addition to mini schools, all enumerators will be authorized 8 hours of self-study to prepare for working the ARMS3 survey. If you've been assigned samples from multiple versions, you can get 2 additional hours to familiarize yourself with each additional version. For example, if you were only assigned records from the version 1 cost and returns report, you can get 8 hours of self-study. If you also have samples from the corn version, then you can have 10 hours of home study. If you have samples from the cost and returns report, the corn version, and the dairy version, then you can have 12 hours of home study. New enumerators who have never worked ARMS3 or maybe have only worked the survey once in the past may have an extra 2 hours of home study. The self-study time is intended to be used by enumerators for reading the interviewer's manual, reviewing the different versions of the questionnaires, watching all of the training videos posted to the Purdue site, taking the home study quiz, and preparing questions to ask your supervisors at the mini-schools. Just like with the ARMS2 training, the ARMS3 videos posted to the Purdue site were created by a cross-regional team of statisticians from several regions across the country, including some of the best trainers NASS has to offer. At your mini-schools, you will be meeting with your supervisor and other members of your enumerator team to go over the quizzes, go through practice exercises, conduct mock interviews, and get yourself comfortable enough with the survey so you'll be able to hit the ground running when data collection officially begins. Be sure to communicate with your supervisors concerning the date, time, location, and expectations of your mini-school. If you are unable to attend your region's mini-school, either because of a scheduling conflict or possibly because you don't feel well and don't want to risk getting your fellow enumerators or supervisors sick, please reach out to your supervisors to discuss options. Let's talk about how much work we have here ahead of us for the ARMS3. The sample sizes for our region are shown in the table below. As I mentioned earlier, there are 3 different versions we'll be working on this year. Version 1 is the traditional cost and returns report, or CRR, and that is by far the largest sample in all 3 states. Version 2 is the corn version. Version 4 is a dairy version and is one of the livestock forms we rotate through every few years. For those who are curious, there is a version 3 which focuses on rice in 6 southern states. Questionnaires were mailed to respondents on December 27th. There will also be 2 reminder postcards sent to respondents this year. The first postcard is scheduled to be mailed on January 18th, and the second postcard reminder will be mailed on March 21. Data collection can begin in early to mid-February. We are encouraging enumerators to wait to start calling operators until at least February 15, if possible, to take advantage of the mailings that are scheduled in the hopes that we can use those mailings to work to our advantage. So we mentioned in the Friday feedback recently that about 2,000 records in our region have been designated as eligible for field enumeration. These records are among the top 10,000 most influential in the country. They were selected from across all versions, farm types, and farm sizes based on their potential impact on the survey indications given the expected commodities grown. There are a few ways you will be able to tell which forms will be eligible for field enumeration and which must be contacted by phone only. First, there will be something written on the front of the paper questionnaire form itself, like a big F or the word field. Second, there will be a comment in the CAPI listings that will say whether the form is eligible for field enumeration or if it must be phoned. Third, within the CAPI listings, the records which need to be phoned will have the green telephone icon next to them, and the ones eligible for personal interviews will not. Now, we've had some shuffling of forms between different supervisor regions in order to make sure that we had enough enumerators assigned to every record so that at a minimum, every record could be called by someone. However, if you're looking at your list of records to personally enumerate and you find some records that are outside of your normal travel area, please contact your supervisor to discuss with them how best to proceed. You may just try to complete those records by phone. The record may need to be moved to an enumerator in a different part of the state. It's also possible that you may be asked to travel outside of your normal enumerating area and get the extra time and mileage to complete the report. Your supervisor will know how he or she wants those records handled. Now, just because there are records eligible for field enumeration doesn't mean we can just hop in our car and head over to those operations like we did in past years, even if they're not too far away. There are very strict guidelines that have been provided by NASDA regarding field enumeration for this survey. First and foremost, the enumerator must be fully vaccinated from COVID-19 and have their vaccination record card scanned and uploaded to iSolved. The first attempt to contact these operators must be by phone. We need to make sure that the operator has agreed to the visit and that the enumerator has scheduled an appointment in advance. Don't just show up to someone's property uninvited. We don't know what the situation is with those operators. There may be some that either may be sick or concerned that visitors to their property will make them sick. Livestock operations also have very strict biocontrol protocols that limit outside visitors even in a normal year. Once you're able to visit, masks will be worn at all times during the interview, and social distancing must be followed where possible. Your supervisors will be able to discuss options regarding this at your mini schools. Of course, if you are not comfortable personally visiting an operation, speak to your supervisor about having your work reassigned. Records that are not eligible for field enumeration are expected to be contacted by phone. These records will also be identified on the paper form with either a P or the word phone on the front, and will have comments in CAPI to say that it must be phoned, and it will show the green telephone icon indicating that it is intended to be phone only. Now, some of you may be wondering if it might be possible to visit one of these operators that are coded for phone only if perhaps they're right next door or right up the road from an operator that is eligible to be field enumerated, or perhaps the operator has told you on the phone that they're willing to do the interview if we visit them on their operation. We have already asked our headquarters about this and have been told this will not be allowed under any circumstance. With these records that are being phoned, we are asking enumerators to wait until at least February 15th to begin making calls. And I suppose that would be true for those intended to be field enumerated as well. With the second mailing taking place on February 7th, operators should have the questionnaire in hand by the 15th. So it should be fresh on their minds when you call because they will have just received the copy of the survey. If you call too much before the 15th of February, the respondent may receive another copy of the questionnaire right after you're done with your interview with them. And then they may have suspicions about the project itself, wondering if they actually talked to somebody from the government who was going to help them complete their report. Additionally, where operators are being sent a reminder postcard on January 18th, there's a good chance that the operator may have already done the form online or mailed it in and it just hasn't been processed yet by the time you call. So our recommendation is to let the mail do its thing and use that to our advantage before we start calling operators. For those records that are phone only, the first contact focus should not be on trying to get the interview completed right away. First, you'll want to introduce yourself and remind respondents that they should have just received a copy of the form in the mail. If someone tells you they lost the form, we can send them another copy, but we will want to verify the address we have on file is correct. You'll want to encourage the operator to complete the form themselves if they can, either by mailing it in or completing the form online, but offer to help them if they need it. If the operator agrees to do the survey and they say they'll do it themselves, then thank them and let them know that you or someone may follow up in a few weeks if they have questions about their report. As far as the forms themselves go, we are going to be sending all labeled questionnaires to your supervisors to be distributed at your mini schools rather than sending everyone their individual forms. Unlike ARMS2, we are not going to be putting questionnaires in individual envelopes. For ARMS2, that was necessary because there was a lot of supplemental material that needed to go with each questionnaire. We don't have that really so much for ARMS3. Comments and assignments are available for review in the CAPI app, and the CAPI listings should line up with the paper forms you have in hand. If you see a discrepancy, please check with your supervisor. We're also providing a limited number of respondent booklets, which are intended to be reused for multiple interviews. Finally, we're sending a limited number of UPS labels to each supervisor for shipping work back to the National Processing Center in Jeffersonville, Indiana. At this point, we are only sending 10 labels to each supervisor with the idea that one shipment of forms each week can be sent to NPC for keying and scanning. You're going to need to be dependent upon your CAPI listings to keep track of your samples. Attempted contacts should be logged in the CAPI system so that your supervisor can monitor your progress. Please be sure to read all comments and notes before contacting your operators. Out-of-date comments should be updated on the paper forms before they're sent to NPC for keying and scanning. Keep in mind that not all phone numbers for an operation are listed on the front page of the questionnaire. To see all known or potential new phone numbers, review the CAPI instrument or your listings. If you find that there are phone numbers or addresses that are in comments or in the supplemental enumerator notes that are either valid or invalid, please make updates on the paper form and mark Office Use Box 0009, which is in the bottom right corner of the face page, with a 1. This will be a signal that there is something written on the form which requires extra attention, like a change in address or phone number. Otherwise, without marking that box 0009, those updates might get missed. When we send out work to be assigned, we pay close attention to those records that happen to be matched with other ongoing surveys. In February and March, there are several surveys which are going on at the same time. The first three listed here, February potato stocks, annual bee and honey production, disposition and income, and turkeys raised, all end their data collection by February 15th. If you know that you have an operator that has also been selected for these particular surveys, which should be noted in the comments in CAPI, consider waiting until later in February to make your first contact for ARMS3. It's quite possible that the enumerator assigned to these other surveys is not the same enumerator assigned to do the ARMS3. So the less you can trip over each other, the better. The next four surveys in this list continue much later into the survey period and will most likely require closer attention. For matches with floriculture, which runs until March 1st, please try to complete the floriculture form as early as possible to avoid conflicts with the ARMS3 data collection. For March crops acreage production and stocks, or APS survey, the March hog survey, and the fruit and berry PDI surveys conducted in Michigan, data collection continues well into March. At the time of this recording, the samples for those surveys are not available to review. When we do get them, we will assign those records to whichever enumerator is working the ARMS3 survey. As we progress into April, we will have the quarterly milk production report, the quarterly colony loss survey, and the April potato stock survey to work on. Unless otherwise directed by your supervisor, those records will be assigned to whichever enumerator is working ARMS3. For cash rents, which begins around the 1st of April and runs until June, those records will be set aside from phoning until after ARMS3 data collection is over. Finally, as we head into mid-March and April, enumerators are going to begin working on June area pre-screening activities just like we did last year. Additionally, as we're heading into a census year, we also have the Agricultural Coverage Evaluation Survey, or ACES, also happening this year. For those who may be unfamiliar with ACES, it is essentially an extension of the June area work, where additional area segments are enumerated with the goal of measuring undercoverage for the 2022 Census of Agriculture mailing list. As a reminder, the Census of Agriculture is scheduled to be mailed out at the end of this year. Over the next few minutes, I want to talk about what the operator received and what resources are available that can get you through the ARMS. First, on December 27th, operators were sent a pre-survey letter, a copy of the labeled questionnaire, and a copy of the respondent booklet for the survey. No one got anything particularly special for being sampled for the different versions of the questionnaire. The letters and the respondent booklets are the same for each survey. A copy of the pre-survey letter that accompanied the questionnaire mailed in December has been posted to the Purdue site. The pre-survey letter asks the respondent to complete the survey, shows them how they can complete their survey online, lets respondents know that their privacy is assured, and explains what happens to the data they do provide. On February 7, operators will be sent a second copy of the questionnaire along with a slightly different version of the pre-survey letter. This letter will act as a reminder to the operator to complete the survey that was mailed to them in December and that there's still time to complete the survey. Otherwise, the letter contains the same information as the December pre-survey letter. A copy of this letter can be found on the Purdue site. On January 18, and then again on March 21, operators are going to be sent a reminder postcard, possibly in a pressure-sealed mailer, to remind them to complete the ARMS and that another copy of it is on its way. The mailer also includes the respondent's survey code that can be used to complete the form online through the AgCounts website. A copy of this form has also been posted to the Purdue site. One of the best things that an enumerator can consider handing out to respondents or leaving behind after visits is the ARMS brochure. This form includes everything the public needs to know about the survey and offers some data points derived from ARMS. A small number of these brochures were sent to enumerators in their training packets. But there's also an electronic copy of the brochure on the Purdue site, and it can be found on the ARMS survey page on the NAS public website at the address shown. Also included as part of your training packet is a hard copy of the form we call the backgrounder. This form is meant to provide information and talking points for enumerators as they discuss the survey with potential respondents. It is not intended to be handed out to the public or to respondents, but it could be if needed, and we do happen to have hundreds of copies of this form at the regional office. It has been recommended, however, that if there was a choice of forms to hand out, that the ARMS brochure is more concise and easier to understand for people who are outside of NAS. The Enumerator Guide contains key messages about the survey and discusses strategies to explain the more complex parts of the questionnaire into simpler terms. The form talks about why ARMS is important to producers, why there are questions about COVID-19 in the CRR form, and provides tips on how you can be successful in enumerating the survey. A copy of the Enumerator Guide was included with your training packets, and an electronic copy is available on the Purdue site. This booklet is not intended for distribution to respondents, but is intended more as a reference guide for enumerators that includes various talking points, tips, and examples of the uses of ARMS. The ARMS Farm Finances Flyer is something else to consider handing out to operators. It is meant to show the range of findings from ARMS data, including financial, production, costs, conservation, and typology. A few copies of this form have been included with your training packet. You can also download and print copies of this form from the Purdue site or from the ARMS survey page on the NAS public website at the address shown. Another great resource which shows good examples of data coming directly from the ARMS is this ERS publication titled America's Diverse Family Farms. I would say this would be something else good to hand to our respondents along with the brochure, but unfortunately, it doesn't look like we actually received our copies of this form in the office yet. If we do get copies, we will send them along to you. With a return to field enumeration, NAS has printed door hangers to be used with the ARMS. Each enumerator was provided with a small supply in their training packets. In most years, these are left to hang on the front door of the operator's home when the enumerator stops by to visit and the operator isn't there. In theory, if we're only visiting operators with hard appointments, then the only time we might need these is if the operator missed the appointment. Typically, you would want to put your contact information or attach your business card to the door hanger. You may also choose to attach a copy of the ARMS brochure to the door hanger as well. There are several other resources available on the Purdue site. Some of these items we have provided hard copies of for you in the training packets, but we didn't include everything. Most notably, we did not print off the code sheets, the monthly prices information, the checkoff guides, the top 10 lists, the press releases, and a few other miscellaneous items. Please take the time during your self-study to familiarize yourself with the contents of the ARMS3 page on the Purdue website so that you're aware of all the resources available to you. The key messages which all of these resources are intended to convey and which you as an enumerator should focus on are that the information that the operator provides is important and will help make better decisions when it comes to the development of government policy that affects their farm or ranch. We want to emphasize that we know the survey takes a long time to complete and that we appreciate the time spent completing the survey. We also want to assure operators that the data they provide will be kept strictly confidential and that no information about their individual farm will be published. So to please complete the survey. Here are a few other things you can take into consideration when communicating with respondents about this survey. Be careful when using acronyms or bureaucratic jargon or office slang with operators. I've heard from many enumerators in the past that it's hard to keep up with all the different acronyms that we have, so imagine how an operator feels who only deals with our agency once every few years. Even terms like ARMS might be too much, and certainly they may not think about this survey as being in 3 phases, especially if their data were estimated for ARMS Phase 1 and they weren't even sampled for ARMS Phase 2. It also helps to remind operators that this is the only survey that assesses the economic state of the agricultural sector, while at the same time measures the financial health of farm families. Remember, policymakers have no other way of knowing the costs incurred by farmers and ranchers. There are several resources on the Purdue site and in your training packet that can be used to help convince reluctant respondents to complete the form. And one of the most important messages there is this: if you don't fill out the survey, how are you going to be represented? Very few people serving in Congress today come from farm backgrounds, and those that do can't just rely on their personal background to be representative of the needs of farmers and ranchers across the country. Additionally, legislators have lobbyists whispering in their ears all the time, trying to convince them of one side of the story that will benefit them or their clients. ARMS provides objective information about the state of family farms straight from the source, farmers and ranchers from across the country. Switching gears for a few minutes, I want to talk about recording data on the paper form, which I'm sure your supervisor will emphasize to you as well. There shouldn't be any places on the form where you should be entering a dash. In many cases, there is a checkbox with the word none next to it. If there is no none box, then you can either enter a 0, if appropriate, or leave the cell blank. Keep in mind that zeros are sometimes needed for certain questions and will be keyed from the image of the form. For example, let's say an operator is a hog contractee. There may be hogs on the operation that aren't owned by the respondent. In that case, the number of hogs to be recorded on the operation would be positive, but the number of hogs owned would be recorded as 0. Be sure to pay close attention to the type of answer the questionnaire is expecting based on the question being asked. For example, you might be entering a whole number of items such as dollars, animals, tractors, etc. In a few places on the form, such as hedging gains and losses, recognized gain or loss on the sale of livestock or real estate, the value can be negative. Some of the questions are asking for percentages, such as the percent of on-farm use of cars and trucks. On the debt table, interest rates are recorded as percentages to 2 decimal places. In Section E, you're using commodity codes to indicate what crop or livestock item was involved in a production or marketing contract. In Section M, you're working with value codes from the value code table. And one confusing area sometimes is that none is associated with value code 1. There is no value code 0. Of course, be sure to write on the paper questionnaire with a black lead pencil that can be clearly seen when a copy of the form is scanned. Writing in pencil will also be easier to work with in the event that you make a mistake and need to make a correction. After you've completed entering the data into the form, it's important to review your work to make sure that the information makes sense and tells the complete story of the operation. Were there unusual situations you ran into that required an explanation? Be sure to write that explanation down. Were there times that you had to use the other please specify boxes because the operator was doing something that didn't fit into one of the other boxes? Then be sure to explain that situation in a comment. Did you follow all the skip instructions? Were the value codes in Section M recorded appropriately? Most importantly, were all of the data relationships across the different sections of the form considered? There are way too many of these data relationships to talk about in this video, but among your training materials and on the Purdue site, there is an edit guide which should help you check these various data relationships. Many of the training videos on the Purdue site also talk about the relationships that should be checked across the different sections as well. Now let's take a few minutes to talk about how you're supposed to handle the surveys once they're completed. Complete reports with good data, not those that are out of business, are to be sent to the National Processing Center, or NPC, in Jeffersonville, Indiana, either by you or by your supervisor. Now, when I say the report is complete, it's okay if some of the items are missing. Every question on the form does not have to be answered, and the operator is bound to skip a few items. When submitting the form, when possible, try to have all of the important notes and name and address updates written directly on the questionnaire. When you do write notes on the questionnaire, please don't write anything in the outer margins of the form, as anything outside of the black boundary on each page could be cut off from the form when it's scanned. Do not submit extraneous pieces of paper, respondent booklets, or post-it notes with the form, as they can easily get lost and slow down the scanning and keying process. If you need to have an extra sheet of paper included, be sure that the state FIPS code and the POID are both written on the form. If you made a name or address update, again, please be sure to enter a 1 in the office use box 0009 in the bottom right corner of the face page. This code will tell those editing the form that there is something on the questionnaire which requires special attention, and the editor will go into the scanned image to find what that change is. Now, suppose the operator refuses to complete the ARMS, or perhaps the operator is inaccessible, or the target didn't operate a farm during 2021, or perhaps the operation is an abnormal farm, meaning it could be a university research farm or a prison farm whose finances don't follow the same kind of behaviors you would see in a family farm. Essentially, let's just suppose we're talking about a form that doesn't have any data in the body of the questionnaire. Those forms should all be submitted in CAPI along with detailed notes to explain the situation. Screening forms and out-of-business screeners should be used to verify there was no ag activity, or there was a change in the operator or some other change in the operating status of the farm business since the ARMS-1 report was completed last summer. Most importantly, do not send any screener forms, and do not send mostly blank questionnaires, those that have no usable data on them, to NPC to get keyed. NPC will not key them or even check them in. In fact, if a blank form is sent to NPC, all they will do is send it back to East Lansing to have us follow up on it. And it just slows the whole process down. In those cases, just submit the form in CAPI and enter the notes that you wrote on the screener form into the comment section in CAPI. Out-of-business screener forms should always be sent back to East Lansing for processing, never to NPC. Please communicate with your supervisor regarding how completed forms should be handled before they are shipped to NPC. Supervisors are expected to review at least one completed questionnaire from each enumerator, and they're expected to conduct at least one quality control contact with a respondent of yours, either as a follow-up call or in shadowing an interview. Supervisors will also decide if and when you can start sending your work directly to NPC. Some may insist that you send all work to them for review first, while others may say after you've done quality control on the first one that you can send everything afterward to NPC. Please be sure to communicate with your supervisors to know exactly what they want. Remember, they're your boss. Be sure to be sending work to your supervisors on a flow basis. Now, that doesn't mean send each individual questionnaire into NPC separately, but it also means you shouldn't be sitting on the questionnaires either. There are benchmark due dates that we're expecting you to keep up with, and the office will be contacting supervisors regularly throughout the survey to get status reports on where certain forms might be. To assist your supervisor and the office in keeping track of your work, be sure to use the CAPI attempted call log to document progress on your samples, and be sure to update your timesheet in iSolve on a daily basis. And speaking of benchmark due dates, here's what we're looking at. As I noted earlier, we're recommending that calling on ARMS3 not begin until at least February 15th. This will give the mail time to work and will allow those who might be tempted to mail in the form after having received the postcard reminder a chance to fill it out and send it in before you call them to set up an appointment to do the survey with you. Also, keep in mind that there are a number of matching surveys that end their data collection on February 15th. So starting much earlier than February 15th could cause problems with the overlapping data collection between the surveys. You may also end up with an operator getting called by two different enumerators on the two different NAS surveys, and that's never a good thing. Striking while the iron is hot, you should try to make every attempt to complete your first contacts for all of your samples by the 1st of March. Hopefully, you'll have a few people willing to set up appointments with you, and you might have others that will be convinced to do the form online or mail it back in. You'll also have a few that will refuse on the phone, and you can get those over and done with before the big March crop and hog surveys start up. Now, the next two are not hard deadlines, but in order to not get yourself backed up, we would like to see by March 25th that you have 50% of your samples complete. And by April 8th, you should have 75% of your samples complete. The last day to complete data collection is April 18. Then, on April 19, you'll want to make sure that all ARMS3 forms with good data are in the UPS on their way to NPC in Jeffersonville, Indiana, while all non-response, out of business, inaccessible, out of scope refusals are submitted in CAPI with comments. Now, I've gone through quite a bit in this presentation without even really talking about the questionnaire itself. Keep in mind, there are several videos included on the Purdue site which go over the questionnaire in great detail, as well as discuss the importance of the survey and strategies for working with reluctant respondents. Inevitably, you're going to have questions. As they come up, be sure to contact your supervisor first, as they have years of experience working with the ARMS in a context that most NAS staff do not. I'm including here contact information for your NASDA coordinators, the regional office main phone line, and I'm including the email addresses of the ARMS3 stat, Alan Erickson, myself, as I'm the group leader for the surveys team in the regional office, and Deputy Director Ty Tolbert, who is my boss. If you're having issues with iSolve or your timesheet, we're including the email for Catherine Kimball, our budget and accounting technician, and her contact information. For those of you who prefer to use the phone, calling the regional office main line will allow you to get a hold of anyone in the office and everyone whose name is listed on this screen. In closing, I want to thank you for everything that you do as a NASDA enumerator. Those of us working for the regional office would not be able to do what we do if it were not for the hard work and dedication of enumerators like yourself collecting data on NAS surveys. Of course, if you have questions about a particular record or something in the training material, please do not hesitate to contact your supervisor or your NASDA coordinator or someone from the regional office team. Thank you for your attention to this presentation, and I wish you the best of luck with the upcoming survey.